What is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word Chinese and Kung Fu? For most Chinese Americans, this question is often generalized due to the misconception that all Chinese know Kung Fu and they are mastered in it. The assumption that we all know martial arts is one of the handful of stereotypes that pop culture has been mainlining to the masses, leaving individuals to challenge these overly simplified notions of Asian identity. The China doll, the dragon lady, the laundryman, especially the Kung Fu stereotypes for decades. And Hollywood isn't helping. In the mid 60s, Bruce Lee introduced the mastery of martial arts to the Western society through his roles in movies. With his success in Hollywood, Bruce Lee became a household name and a pioneer of Kung Fu to the mainstream North American and European cultures. Western society had long been exposed to westernized movies, but it was not until Bruce Lee that Kung Fu had found its place in Western culture. The introduction of Kung Fu stimulated the differences between the Asian and European cultures. In his movies, he always represented a tough and superhuman image, which demonstrated the underclass needs, values, and problems of social injustice of Asians. The Kung Fu stereotype Bruce Lee created recognized cultural identities and redefined the once subservient. Thus, Bruce Lee can be attributed to as a main source of the Kung Fu stereotype. Jackie Chan's role in Kung Fu movies took a slightly different approach in that they were more of humor and comedic nature. He added some comedic elements in his moves in order to make people laugh. In many cases, some people say Jackie Chan is the Charlie Chaplin to Kung Fu movies. Jackie Chan enhanced the cheerful atmosphere and softened masculinity, whereas Bruce Lee and Jet Li often had a more serious and businesslike approach. Jet Li is another example that introduced Kung Fu to the Western audiences on the big screen. In many of his movies, he would be portrayed as a martial arts expert. In his earlier roles, he was characterized as a gang boss or portrayed as a pugilist. For example, in his first movie, Lethal Weapon 4, Jet Li plays a gang leader that possesses masterful martial arts skills. These skills are clearly on display during an encounter in where Jet Li skillfully disarms and takes out two individuals with guns with relative ease. A Chinese actress by the name of Bingbing Li was casted to play the role of Ada Wong in the movie Resident Evil 5. In order to play the role, Bingbing Li had to endure 5 months of training with a stunt team, just to be able to learn and perform the kung fu stunts suitable for the role. Clearly, if all Chinese knew and were masters at kung fu, this training would not have been necessary.
Wesker's top agents. I know exactly who and what you are. Now the real question is, why don't I...
The true values of kung fu are often poorly misinterpreted by Hollywood movies. In many of these movies, kung fu is used as a style of combat to glorify violence and inflict pain to your enemy. In reality, traditional kung fu values the likes of discipline, hard work, dedication, and the use of your skills to better oneself and not to harm others. Hollywood movies completely miss these values and depicts the use of kung fu in a violent manner. An individual's views and perspectives are often influenced by the media. It is safe to say not everyone of Chinese descent knows kung fu, let alone be a kung fu master. But the way the media and Hollywood often depict Asian actors, it is presumed that they have a strong background of kung fu. This depiction of Asian actors is often seen in Hollywood movies, and thus has influenced the mainstream audience to accept this ideology as a norm. On the other hand, kung fu is not equal to justice, as all bad guys that are supposedly experts in kung fu died by the means of guns and firearms fired by the good guys. It seemed to match Chris Rojek's findings in his article Stuart Hall on Representation. media messages are embedded with presuppositions. People who know Kung Fu are not often depicted in a positive leading role, which brings negative influences in reshaping the self concept and esteem of minorities. At last, the misconception of Kung Fu stereotypes is still a cycle in the Hollywood curriculum. The audiences may eventually perceive media images to be authenticated as heavy exposure to the virtual world constructed by the media, which shapes the audience's beliefs and conceptions of reality. Although stars nowadays might not know Kung Fu, their racial identity enforces them to know. The media has narrowed reality and our imaginations. The stereotype is not appropriate, but it continues to be perceived due to the mainstream acceptance of the idea instilled by the influence of Hollywood movies.
Last but not least, according to model minority representation of Asian Americans are still rare on the mainstream media. The lack of representation of characters other than Kung Fu masters also play an important role in Chinese Kung Fu stereotypes in movies.